Hey guys, so we just wrapped up an episode with James Campion. This is the second time he's been in this podcast, and every time I chat to this guy, I leave feeling more knowledgeable, very inspired, and very connected because he's just a really great dude. So in this episode, we talked about some of the big changes that he's made to his training that has had a really drastic result on not just his physical performance, but also his mental, spiritual, you name it. And I saw on an Instagram post that he had said, he started working with his coach and, he had helped him unlock this new level of performance. And I thought that it was going to be something to do with training, maybe some new protocol that he was playing with that was allowing him to build more muscle. But, as we dig into in the episode, it ends up being not related to that at all, which actually was really, really nice for me to hear. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy hearing the changes that James has made in the changes that he has made in his life and how it has impacted his performance and his health. And bear in mind, this is a guy who's been competing in bodybuilding, for a really, really long period of time. Outside of that, we talk about the importance of cardiovascular training, not only for health, but also to support his performance as a bodybuilder. We talk about the role of mentors, how much that's impacted him in both his personal life, his training, and his professional life as well. And then the last piece, which I found really interesting because it's a subject I am just not very knowledgeable on, I feel a bit naive talking about, is testosterone. James is very openly taking performance enhancing supplements, and I love that he's not taboo about it. He's super open, super honest about it. We've had some great conversations about it online, and we actually sat down and talked very openly about it. I learned a lot about that that area. Is something I really didn't know much about, and I think you guys can enjoy it too. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. James Campion, welcome back to the Process Podcast, my friend. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well.
This is your second time being on the podcast.
Yep.
Episode 29. Al, what episode are we on right now?
We are right now. We are on 238.
Okay, so we managed to hit an episode every week. We've actually recently up to 2 weeks. So you were pretty early days.
Yeah.
We were in that room. There was no lights.
Yeah.
We were on an iPhone.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Oh, we did have a mic set up.
Yeah, we did.
It was our very first mic set
yeah.
up. So those listening, before I hand this over to James to give a bit of an introduction, James came on episode 29. We talked about prepping for competition. We talked about wearable devices. Do you remember any of this?
Yep.
Nutrition, mindset. Talked about your training, competing, all that stuff. So
Yep.
go back and listen to that early days. It's going to be interesting to hear where you're at in your life right now and if any of that has changed. So maybe to start, a quick introduction. Who are you, James? What do you do?
Sure, I'll keep it brief. Yeah, I'm basically a full-time personal trainer in Hong Kong. I think actually you and I probably go way back to football club days when we were in our teens, doing high school, playing rugby here. So I've known yourself and Ant for a long time, and obviously I've known Coastal since it's set up. So we eventually, in terms of myself in personal training, we've got to a point where we've opened our gym too. So a personal training gym in Hong Kong called HIT Personal Training. I started off in a couple different gyms, Ultimate Performance, moved into some freelance, opened another gym called Hybrid, and then eventually to where we are now in HIT Personal Training. And I think I can sum it up as I'm just overall a very enthusiastic personal trainer. Competitive bodybuilding, but that has taken a little bit of a step back in the priorities since, owning a business and running things gets a little bit more hectic. But beyond that, that's pretty much my life. So training, eating, coaching, rinse and repeat.
I'd actually be interested. What is your typical, run me through a typical day for you?
Yeah, it's very boring in the sense that it's pretty much the same thing every day.
Sounds exactly like mine, mate. It's great.
I think that's why we get along. It's basically get up at 4:00, probably do a little bit of admin, head to the gym, first client 5:30, run through a couple, maybe 3-4 clients, meetings, several more clients in the afternoon, training, last bit of either admin or another client, followed by home, in bed by 8:30, 9:00. And I think for me, that setup works incredibly well because I like to get out early, just start things and get going. I have, sort of selective times when I want to be on my own admin, or if it's more of a creative side or whatever, get stuff done through the to-do list. back in, get the energy back up for some clients and my own training, and then obviously bring it down towards the end of the day and make sure I've ticked everything off in terms of devices and, you know, messages coming in by at least 7 o'clock, watching some, you know, crap on TV, fall asleep. That's pretty much me every day. And to be honest, I could run that day as many like weeks, months, until the point where I feel like I'm just physically exhausted. And then I'll go on holiday and do it again.
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have been doing really amazing things with hit-pt.
Thank you.
I feel like on social media and the outside world looking in, you guys are just going from strength to strength, and you are about to expand.
Yes.
You guys are leveling up big time, moving into a bigger space, growing your business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. It's great timing. It's just happening right now. So, essentially, you know, from the very beginning, we started actually during COVID 2020. So we've already experienced our first lockdown. We opened the gym during the second lockdown, and that was kind of on a little bit of a gamble in the sense we're going to get some low rents, but obviously we're closed, so it could be, you know, it could either pay off well or not very well. It ended up paying off quite well because we did actually use that time to sort of get the business started and running without tons of clients coming in, but enough to make sure we ensured, you know, outside sessions are still taking place online and all that stuff. So, you know, we fast forward and we ended up expanding to a second floor in the same building that we were at. Following that, we opened up Singapore. So that's been open for about 9 months now in Singapore. And now at this point, we've just expanded to a new location, which is in the entertainment building in Central. So this is now just being able to consolidate the 2 floors that we have into one big floor, which is, you know, it's absolutely fine to have 2 floors, but just to be able to have one big space where everyone can just gel, you can feel the energy from, you know, the front to the back, we can communicate easy. It's the buzz in the room that's just changed everything. So, you know, it's been really nice to take those steps forward as we go. But I think right now, just being able to be in a big, you know, one level of space, we have 14 personal trainers going at once. Everyone's got 30 sessions a week. The room is just insane. So, you know, right now we're just ecstatic with everything.
What's it been like opening a new gym in another country? What's that challenge been like?
It's definitely been interesting because, you know, I think when we opened Hong Kong in very unfavorable conditions, closure, COVID, or, you know, everything like that, we figured that would be, you know, the worst case scenario. So anything up is going to be absolutely fine. We've really solidified our processes, our brand. We've got a lot of social proof. You know, we've got a lot of results. We've got a lot of people, you know, giving great feedback and reviews. Second gym should be good. But then obviously you go to a new country and you realize you're still not really well known in other places. So it is actually almost like starting from the bottom again. But it did force us to think, where do we do things slightly different without losing what makes us hit personal training? So, you know, that being, we do a results-based training. We're mostly involved in transformation, so getting people into shape. But results-based is still going to involve strength gain, movement improvement, dietary habits, obviously, or just general mental health. You know, if people come in, they say, I want to feel better, and now they feel excellent in this routine of habits. As long as the result has been achieved, they came in, they asked for something, we will deliver it. But it's not just transformations. But what we didn't want to do is say, well, we'll sort of dip into group training a bit here because that's not our forte, or we'll start going into more, you know, like high rock style training. That's not our forte. We can start to build exercises, nutrition, recovery around your high rocks training that you might take place somewhere else. But what we do is more individual. Let's get specific with you. Let's track your body metrics. That's what we do. So we just didn't want to lose that. But obviously each country has different, you know, demands, different types of people getting set up. What are the trainers like there? And so it has been a little bit of a change in the direction what I thought it would be, but it's taking off. And I think it's just for the next time that we do that, we're well prepared that it's not just going to be the same blueprint. So it has been very interesting, but it's been eye-opening and I've learned quite a lot.
Yeah, love it. I feel like that's an episode in itself. I'd love to talk about the business side of things and, you know, how you've expanded gone from a small gym in really tough times to now, you know, expanding into a bigger facility right in the heart of Hong Kong, and then, you know, opening a gym overseas as well. So well done, mate.
Thank you.
But I wanted to switch gears because the big thing for today that I want to talk about is training.
Sure.
And then with training, we're going to veer off in a few different directions. I'd like to talk about supplementation. I'd love to talk about aerobic training as well as weight training, and things that you're doing yourself as someone who has been in the competitive bodybuilding space, but working with people who are trying to build as much muscle as possible.
Yeah.
But before we go into that, I would like to know, what does your training look like? You kind of you run us through your day. You're training in the afternoons right now, 5 days a week, 6 days a week.
Yeah, it's generally 5 days a week, sometimes 4, depending on the schedule.
And are you training for something in particular?
So I'm always training for the idea of competing again. I think I have to have a goal, and you know, I'm sure everyone in this gym can relate to that. I can't just show up to the gym to train for the sake of it. So I always have in the back of my head, I must, you know, strive towards a bodybuilding competition. The date doesn't necessarily need to be set. It's more of just when it happens, I'm ready. I'm not, you know, super far out. So when it's training is kind of set out in the exact same way it's always been. I just prefer a split that goes push pull legs. So it's not really super strict. It's just make sure we get at least 1 push, 1 pull, 1 legs, and ideally I can get another 2 or 3, you know, behind that. But each session is basically progressive overload. Like we've got the logbook. You know, I'm trying to film every single set to make sure, you know, if we're pushing hard, the form lock is locked in. If I can review that and I'm happy, you know, I'll take the progression next week if it's there. If it's not looking good, happy to stay on that and keep that in terms of how can I execute better, or as what can I see from the film that I didn't understand when I was doing the set that I can sort of self-coach. But I still take these videos and send them off to my coach and to be honest, various other coaches that I've met who are just either like biomechanic technicians. This is their specialty. What are they going to see and zoom in on that I'm not seeing? And even though it's very, very nuanced, it's like when you get to the peak of whatever you're at, you know, you're at 100 kilo bench press for say, and that's your absolute max. How do you get to 101 kilos, or how do you get that 100 kilos just that much better? You have to zoom in on the microscope a lot. So having these other people just to assess that video, it means I've got a lot more purpose going to the gym. I'm not just like, right, I'll pull something down, I'll push something away. I have to have these notes in my, you know, my training log from what happened last time and see if I can really execute. And if it doesn't go well, you just, again, you reflect and say, okay, I didn't feel good, or couldn't get my shoulder locked in, had a bit of a niggle or whatever, just so you've got more accurate representation of what's happening session to session. Because I don't want to come in again off of a busy day, you know, lots of clients, you've given your energy to a lot of different people, whether that's management, if it's the client, if it's, you know, whoever. I just want to be able to look at a book, say, that was what happened last time, that's the goal this time. Keeps it simple.
I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode with a quick shout out to our sponsors, Today Well Spent. I've been using this journal for 2 years and it has made a massive impact on my physical, but mostly my mental well-being. It is a guided journal backed by neuro and behavioral science, which I actually didn't know at the time. It has questions for you to answer at the start of the day, at the end of the day, end of every week, end of every month. And it's brought so much self-awareness to me of the things that positively and negatively impact my life. So if you're someone who cares about your physical and your mental well-being, which I think you do because you listen to this podcast, then go and grab yourself a Today Well Spent. Use the discount code THEPROCESS, one word in capitals, to get your discount. How, like, as an individual yourself, like this idea of self-regulation versus like following a progression,
Yeah.
are you someone who tends to be like, okay, I might be feeling a little bit tired, fatigued today, didn't sleep very well last night, but I'm going to push hard for that progression? Is that where you spend most of your time? Or are you someone who kind of leans into where you're feeling and maybe, like, you know, you spend more time maybe not pushing the progression and just training for quality or doing sub-maximal work?
So this has been probably the biggest mindset shift that I've had in the last, I'd say, year or so. And it takes us back to the discussion we had last time here when we talked about the wearables and the Whoop, right, which I've still got. But you mentioned, oh no, at the time we were both whooping.
Yeah.
And then a
Early
couple
days.
weeks later, you said, I'm stopping the Whoop.
Yeah.
I think the reason was you were over reliant on the Whoop, or it was affecting your mood or how you would perceive the day, whatever.
Yep.
And I think that's where I'd also reached is, I mean, I still wear it, but to be honest, I think before there was an over reliance on everything has to be perfect. So if my Whoop is low, that's already taken me down a notch. If I haven't slept the right amount, in my head, I'm already down a notch. Or if I haven't got the right food in the right time, so on and so forth. So I would almost say, you know what, don't do the session because it's not optimal. It's not perfect. And what I've come to understand is that's the worst mindset for me is in in the sense that that will leak into everything that you do, not just training, but in terms of work or relationship or anything. If it's not perfect, oh, I won't do it. So it's like that kind of, what is it, paralysis by overanalysis. You're thinking too much about the perfection and trying to be perfect. You just don't do anything at all. So this is actually where, you know, I've sort of started with a new coach. And the reason I wanted to switch coaches was not because of any lack of quality from the previous coach, but I was focusing so much on perfection, whether that's take a rest day, listen to the whoop, you know, perfection on form, all of it. I got to a point where I just almost didn't want to train unless it was all there. So I spent some time with this guy, Jackson Pios. So I know I'm sort of rambling now on your question.
That's
here.
good. Continue.
I've followed this guy for years. He's basically one of those research-based, evidence-based guys. He's done his PhD in nutrition. He contributed a lot towards the studies behind like refeeds and how much do they play into effect, you know, cycling, carbs and things. So he's one of those original educators that was in the field doing the research and interpreting. But his journey has now also been quite anti-science. Not that he's throwing it away. It's just he's seeing all these big professional bodybuilders get massive gains. But then over here in the field of science, these guys are saying this is the perfect diet, perfect training, perfect this, like, you know, reps in reserve, all the stuff we talk about. But they're not that big. So if they've got the optimal formula, how come they're not just all big? They're actually quite small, you know, like for the majority of them. So he took a path and said, you know what, forget what I've read, you know, not entirely, but, you know, a lot of these things. Watch what the big guys are doing. Watch what the pros are doing. They're just full sending it, right? Nothing isn't. You look at most of these top level, you know, let's say bodybuilders, their top bodybuilders, their form is not perfect. Let's be honest. We look at like old Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, whatever, swinging weights and stuff, and we look at that and think, what's going on? And, you know, the science guys are like, that's terrible, but it's working. So I think his mindset was almost, okay, don't just, you know, throw out all the science, but you can't have everything perfect to the study. You know, it doesn't always work in practice. So he started to take that, and I was listening to him quite a lot on this, and I managed to get to Bali at the start of this year to do a camp with him and a bunch of different pro bodybuilders. And it was just a week of training. It felt a bit like Love Island. It was like you're in this this little campus with rooms. You all meet in one place to eat together, and then you'll go do the lectures together, and you'll go and train together. You do cardio together, and you're back in. And there's, you know, people filming and taking pictures. It felt very, very like a reality TV show. But the week just basically exposed you to pro bodybuilders training and eating on a regular basis. They just send it. They don't think too much. There's obviously not like, oh, form doesn't matter. But you start to realize, I can't overthink all these little things. My sleep, my supplements, my food, my this and that. Just do it. And I do notice this from my partner, Karen, who's, you know, basically the first Hong Kong athlete to reach the Mr. Olympia. And what she does so well is just she always gets something done that she needs to do. So if for me, I like to do a training session in the afternoon because that's best. If I don't do it in the afternoon previously, I would just not do it because I'm like, well, it's too late, so I won't be able to train. It's already 6 p.m. That's not ideal. Whereas she would just do it. Doesn't matter if it's in the morning, in the evening, it's going to get done. And that's the attitude of these top level athletes is no matter what it takes, I will do it. And I'm seeing my coach do this as well. And so I needed that. I found I was just pulling back from everything that was not perfect. And eventually I'm just missing sessions, missing meals, or not, you know, all this. Just do it. So I really have appreciated the fact that having someone there just to make sure it doesn't matter how you feel. And it really has played effect into work, because there are days you feel bad, you feel tired or whatever. You could take a sit back if you're, you know, you're running a gym or you're a manager. You have every excuse in the world. Like, don't just do it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just do it. So, you know, in a nutshell, I definitely was lacking that massively in my training. And if my training's bad, I feel bad, my routine's off, everything's off. So this was awesome to get a different perspective, not just from the perfection of each form, but just get it done. Doesn't matter.
I resonate a lot with that.
Mm.
I resonate because I feel like I'm entering a phase right now, and I'm only about 3 weeks into it of basically doing exactly the same thing, which is, okay, I can't I think for me, okay, if I zoom out a little bit, I think where we've gone in the training world is we went from that mentality, just like grit your teeth, get the work done. You played rugby as a youngster, so did I, and that is very much ingrained in the culture, right? On top of that, you don't talk about when you're sore, when you're tired, you just do it. Yeah, that kind of gets like beaten into your skull in a way. And then I think in more recent years, we, and me included, have probably gone quite the other way, right? Where there's conversations about, there's a lot more research on health. And so that, the science guys are coming out, evidence-based guys are coming out now. And, we're talking about like the stress of hard training, the impact of stress and life combined with stress and training. There's not a good collaboration. We need to self-regulate more, need to be more mindful, got to sleep more. And so I feel like I've taken all of that and I've gone too far the other way. And so where I was almost avoiding intensity and I was using how I felt as my marker of health, right? So it was like, well, if I do a really hard training session, I don't feel that good, feel crap. And I took that as a sign of poor health. Like every time I do something hard, I feel bad. Therefore, this can't be good for me. And so I almost, for the first time in my entire life, got scared of hard work. And it was all my own narrative and telling myself that I got to stop doing it. And then obviously you got like David Goggins and those guys, right? Which is like the complete opposite of that, which is like suck it up, go hard, got to do the work. And I think I've been quite confused in a space myself personally. Like, well, where do I sit? Like, I used to be all about David Goggins, then I hated David Goggins. And I'm like, and I don't know when people tell me they love David Goggins, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's doing them good or he's doing them a disservice. And only just recently, since coming back from my holiday, and I think we were away pretty much the same time, I came back. And so I actually attended a really good seminar from Chris Hinshaw, who's, aerobic capacity guy. This guy's 65. I think he's 65 around. He's older than me anyway. And he's hammering himself still in the gym. He's doing really, really hard energy system training. Which is the stuff that I've been avoiding. Like I've been like, yeah, strength stuff, all good. Bodybuilding, hypertrophy wear, all good, but no, I don't want to do anything hard. I don't want to breathe too hard. And then so he's talking about it, and he's obviously then digging into the science. And you obviously got guys like Andy Galpin, Peter Attia right now who are putting out loads of stuff on VO2 Max. And like the important, like you got to push hard and you've got to get uncomfortable with that stuff. And it's kind of I've just completely, it's almost like that. I was reading all that stuff, but this the lens that I was looking at through was like, that doesn't apply to me. And now having gone to this workshop, really feeling like I needed just a new dose of education. I needed to be in that environment. I left it feeling very motivated, new ideas, new principles. And then, burying myself back into books and just catching up on the research and what it's all saying right now. I'm like, I've got to stop avoiding this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's been like this the last couple of weeks where I've just been pushing it a lot more and it feels great.
Feels great.
I wanted to ask you before I share like how I've actually been feeling in the last couple of weeks. When you did that week where you just basically, with these guys on this camp and you just hammered it every day, full send, how did you feel?
Yeah, I was pretty broken by the end, to be honest. But in my head, I mean, I obviously went in there thinking I'm not going to be the guy to talk about something if I feel like it's wrong, because I'm the lowest in the pack here. And I did have a couple of thoughts. I'm like, I don't quite agree with that style of training or, pushing this hard every day or anything. But I came away and I felt great. And I thought all the stuff I've understood, like you said, reps in reserve or taking your rest days, making sure that the training is set up perfectly. It's good and it makes sense, but you do bottle yourself into a little bit of you back yourself into a corner where, again, unless it's absolutely perfect, it's not going to happen. Whereas when I kind of just said, scrap that, go all out, doesn't matter what we're doing, I'm just going to put full effort into everything. A couple aches and pains, but I wasn't overtrained per se. I don't think I didn't lose sleep. I didn't, any symptom you hear of overtraining, you're like, I think a lot of them, you have to really bury yourself to get there.
Yeah.
Over
a prolonged period of time.
Over a prolonged period of time. And you're probably on, not quite the right nutrition program or something like that. Especially if you're more of an advanced athlete, like you don't have to be pro, but you've been training for a period of time, your body's pretty resilient. I think if you're obviously a newbie, you've got to be very careful, but nothing bad's happened. And since then, that was back in Jan. We're now, September. I've applied the same thing every time. And to be honest, I've only felt better in the sense that cardio's now stayed in pretty much every day, whether it's high intensity or if it's medium intensity or low intensity. Like you said, Peter Attia just says you got, X amount of hours to sort of clock up in the week, a couple in the VO2 max, push, a couple more in just zone 2, just try and get some hours logged. And in my previous mind, I'm like, that's going to end up impacting my recovery because, if you're bodybuilding, you're not doing sprints on a bike or whatever. Sprints is going to be massively fatiguing. That's fatigue from my energy and my carbohydrate, glucose source that's going to be used for weight training. I wouldn't do that. That makes no sense. And that's the bodybuilding narrative is you do slow, steady cardio because you want to just get a little bit of cardio, but don't push it. Keep the fatigue low. And I get that. That makes sense. But ever since I've improved my cardiovascular system, I can train harder. I can recover faster in between sets. I can recover faster in between workouts. I don't get as sick as often, so I can train more. This is a net positive. So by kind of ignoring that sort of recovery system, and we're not being silly and saying like, look, you're sick and you've got COVID and you're just going to go to the gym. We're talking like you feel bad, you feel tired, go and get it done. 9 out of 10 times, you're going to have a fantastic workout. The 10th one, it might just not be optimal, but you're not going to feel bad about doing it. Like you've never walked away from a session and thought like, I really wish I hadn't gone to the gym. But so far I haven't felt anything other than benefits to my recovery. My training intensity is now higher than it's ever been. And I come away, there's sort of like the overcoming the obstacle of, I feel really tired today. The last thing I want to do is go into a gym and load up on the weights that I know it's going to hurt. This is going to be so uncomfortable. You do it and you feel so accomplished. And that gives me another mental boost. And I feel like, awesome. Another hurdle has been gone. And also another sort of, tick in the box that I don't need to worry so much about those things like you mentioned. But you have to find your obvious, like your capacity.
Yeah.
You can't just full send every day and not care. There is also a lot of behind the nutrition. How good is your nutrition? Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the sleep thing is like, I don't know. You can't really fix someone's sleep. Like you can give them suggestions. I'm on the Whoop and I do all the blackout blinds and everything you need. If you're busy, you're waking up early, you're not getting much sleep. Do your best, but I'm just going to run on low sleep. I'll rely on nutrition to make sure that's tip top. I'll make sure I'm prepared for the sessions. I'll make sure everything's noted down. I'll get the music in. I'll switch the phone off. Like these are the variables I can control. Sleep is obviously I want to get as much sleep, but that's the one that I have the least amount of control over. So I think for most people, if they can just try to get their sleep as best as possible, but really just home in on everything else, you're going to see dramatic changes. And I do think it's more of like, you kind of just need to push yourself, dude.
Yeah. I think there's also like the law of adaptation that we have to respect, right? So I think for me, when I was training and avoiding the hard stuff, every time I would do a hard thing, it would feel bad. Of course it's going to feel bad. I haven't been doing hard stuff. My body's just complete shock to the system. And I always think back to like early days of CrossFit where we'd put ourselves in a bin every day, twice a day for years. And it's amazing that in those times your body adapts to where nothing actually becomes that hard anymore. You don't get DOMs as much anymore. You bounce back in a couple of days. Now I know age has to be accounted for as well, but I think where I was forgetting what I was forgetting was that there has to be a period of time where probably going to feel a little bit suboptimal.
Yep.
I think we talked about this actually on the Whoop, right? If you're always in the green on the Whoop, you're probably not pushing adaptation hard enough.
Very true.
Because you're not asking your body to do something different, and therefore it's always going to stay the same.
Yep.
And I think that's a period I'm going through right now, which is I'm accepting, I'm making this commitment where I want to start pushing harder. I'm going to do it, but I can't just lean on how I'm feeling.
Yes.
Because if I lean on how I'm feeling, I'm going to feel crap, probably for a couple of weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, maybe even a month.
Yep.
But then at some point in time, if I keep on exposing my body to it, I will adapt. And the human body will find a way to be able to perform the demands that you put on a regular basis. And it's funny you talking about your partner, Karen, because Ant is exactly the same.
Yeah.
He's always been that way. It's like There's nothing's going to get in the way of his training. He's always going to get it done. I mean, even today, he's had a shoulder, an elbow
I've
operation
seen all the posts,
3 months ago, and
Yeah.
he's just got off a flight, flown from the US, arrived at 5 a.m. this morning, coached 3 clients. Then he does an online qualifier workout, which is really intense.
Yeah.
Coaches a couple more clients, goes outside for an hour, comes does another qualifier workout.
Yes.
I'm like, never in a million years would I've done one of those workouts, and he's just done it, and he's still there training.
Yes.
And I think probably the last few years, 5 years ago, I would have been there with him. The last 3 years, I've been looking and being like, you're just nuts.
Yeah,
But also telling myself that you have something that I don't, because you're able to do it and I can't. That's my own narrative, right? But now I'm like, no, you know what? Do it.
Yes.
I've just got to get there.
I think that's been the big eye opener is I think you'll have a lot of people who say, like, even for example, like if whatever method you do to track your nutrition, some people absolutely despise eating only like clean foods, or if they track, their food on a scale, they're like, macros, just keep me within my macros or whatever. Like there's all these different approaches. But when people look at bodybuilders and why do they eat the exact same food, exact same weight at the exact, they've got their alarm going off at every 3 hours to make sure you got to eat now. You're like, this doesn't make any difference. The time you eat doesn't change or whatever. Like the food source, the rice, you can have potatoes, whatever. They're like, yeah, I know that, but I just eat the same stuff every day because that's what I do. And that's the same with the training. It doesn't matter what time of the day, whatever's optimal, suboptimal, caffeine, whatever. I just train. So I think the mindset is that 1% that they will do. They will take the extra 1% to make that little change, even if it, like you said, makes no difference to me in how you do it, what you eat, as long as it fits macros. But that mentality spreads with everything. So it could be their cardio, it could be their weights, it could be their nutrition. It could be the way that they get up in the morning and think, yeah, I'm suboptimal, I'll get it done. Or their work or other habits. And it's the 1% action that they do, which adds up to means that's why they're professional. They're the top of the game. They don't need to explain why this process works or argue which one is better. They just get it done. And I think that's what some people need a little bit of exposure, because on the far other side, like you said, the sort of evidence-based, more research, science, they're looking at the optimal outcome, but they're ignoring the fact that the behaviors are probably the things that are really going. So you could overtrain, past failure every time, nothing on reps and reserve. You've clearly dug your body into the ground, whatever. That should never grow muscle or whatever, from this approach. But they're doing it because they just have that 1% mentality. So I think it is a little bit of, you must understand, the mechanisms behind building muscle or nutrition or sleep or supplements. You have to have an understanding. You can't just go like that would have been us at, 14 going to football club gym. We just pick stuff up, throw it around, terrible form, whatever. No, you need some structured guidance to get you on there, but you just can't abandon that mentality of the kind of the Goggins, like, it doesn't matter how I feel, I need to get it done. You could have him in your ears, whatever, at the same time. But you do need it when you have to flip the switch, right? You just have to go, and you can't overthink. Otherwise, you will just talk yourself out of it.
So you posted recently, and I think that triggered me reaching out to you, because I've known, you've been a guy in the space for so long. You're extremely knowledgeable. You've competed many, many times, and you put a post out with this coach, on this retreat in Bali, and you basically said that something had been unlocked. There was something that you're now doing that is making a difference that you hadn't previously been doing. Is that what we've been talking about? Was that the thing?
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely filtered into every aspect of my life. Because I think towards the end of the last year, Singapore gym opening, flying to Singapore, not really being based there, not really being, set up in Hong Kong when I come back, because I'm not in either. So training's a little bit off, and I'm waiting for the optimal things to come in. And everything was just sort of a bit of a mess. So I didn't quite like how my life was not structured in any way. And that's fine. These things need to happen. But, come January, right at the end of that, that's when I met Jackson in person. And I think it was the perfect timing to meet someone like that. I decided, I've always coached throughout the years. I need a coach to keep me on point. And this period of time when I was in Singapore, I said, I can't coach. I can't be coached because I can't deliver good check-ins back to my coach. I'm not consistent. To be honest, I'm not eating the food properly. Like, my life isn't in order. I don't know what to send you. So I cut the coaching out, but met Jackson in January. And to listen to him talk, he gave some really good presentations that has taken him from sort of his lowest point and how he rose, sort of, whether it's athletic performance, social media, business, everything. He applied certain rules to get him to go there. And I'm like, I'm at that point right now, like kind of at the lower, like nothing bad, but I'm just a bit unmotivated. Nothing's moving. And so him talking through his processes, or his sort of, what he's come to learn about his personality that he needs to adopt, has resulted in these big changes. So I went through the presentation with him. I actually asked him to send me it so I can kind of look at the slides and remind myself what these things are. I had good conversations with him to actually chat one-on-one a bit without bugging him too much. And then I sort of, like a month or so later, I'm like, I need to get coached by this guy. I'm seeing too much information that I need to have in my life. And that's not even just the training side. It's the mentality. So, to break it down, what he did was he had a bit of a low in terms of his health. He got some, infections, and it turned bad, and he was in the hospital for a while. So he couldn't train for like six months. So he had to rebuild. And his processes were basically, I need to isolate myself. So number one is, get out of the crazy, everything's going on around you. Just be on your own so you can be with your own thoughts and sort of process. Number two was journal. And I've never been a journaler. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why I would ever need it. As a guy, we're just like, just do things. Why do I need to note that down? But explain why the importance of journaling. Set out your goals. What do you want today? What do you want in a year? And write it out, because you'll do it every day. As soon as you see it, you'll remind yourself that day, okay, I need to do that. What things am I grateful for? I think that's always been a really silly thing for me to ask myself. It seems a bit woo-woo, so I've never been into it. But I did start writing out, what am I grateful for? So you get that positive reinforcement in your day. What challenges do I need to face, or how should I best facilitate other people in my life? So sort of like regular questions. And every time I would write something out, it would clear my mind, and I'd be much more focused on the task at hand. His other point about journaling was, you have big goals, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years, but they're so far, there's no point looking at that, because you'll just you'll just skip every day until you get there. Just focus on the day-to-day. Just do whatever tick boxes you need on this day that will get you there. That's all you focus on. You also spoke about sort of the mentality behind, how you spend your time with different people. I'm sure this is something you've probably gone through. Are these people helping you? Are they just wasting your time, or a burden on your life, and how to remove the excess? I have a very supportive partner. If I want to work all day, or if I want to travel to go and meet people, or if I want to go to Singapore for 3 months, she's very supportive, and that's been amazing just to have the support. But I think sort of the final thing was, he sort of drew up on this one, which was great, was you need to have a low. Like, you need to have something bad happen. Not that you're going to look for it, but we're all going to have it. That's the most important time to just buckle down and obviously face your challenges, journal, problem solve, and just push through. And he sort of laid this out as I was going through a bit of a, again, nothing bad, but more of like, I really want my life to sort of pick up a little bit right now. And I started applying those rules in that sense, journaling every day, really trying to almost seek out suffering in each day. If it's going too smooth, it's like something's wrong. Like, something should be happening that challenges me today. And I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as a challenge. You got to like reframe it into an opportunity that it allows you to develop. And so when you start to seek out problems, or they come to you, you're like, nice. Or what is it? Jocko Willing says, anything, something bad happens, he says, good.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like that one going on in my head. But it made it so much more fun. You see a really, big challenge or something going really wrong in your life. Normally you just stress out, pull your hair out, and you just want to run away. You're like, no, this is kind of fun. So it has really shifted the mindset, whether it's business, relationship, training, or anything. I needed that guy to sort of show me his story and use all the evidence that he's an evidence-based guy. He's not just saying, oh, this worked. He's saying, here's the studies that worked for journaling. Here's the studies when athletes expose themselves to a stressful event every day. This is what builds mental toughness for these people. And you're like, once it's got some science, I'm like, I'm pretty involved in that. That sounds pretty legit. So I completely forgot the reason that you asked me some questions here. But
it's so good, because I asked you the question about the post that you put up.
Yeah.
Which was basically, that this coach had unlocked something. And I was waiting for you to say, Oh, you know, we've started a new training
Program,
split.
yeah.
We try to start a new training split,
Mm.
and it's just I'm reaping loads of rewards in my training, and I'm so happy that that wasn't the answer, actually.
The training's the same,
Yeah,
literally from my last coach to this coach.
but isn't that like how powerful is that?
Mm.
Because I think that's what we talk about all the time, and I think, you know, I always say it to the CrossFit community, which is, you know, when you look at statistics of the 100 best athletes in the world, you know, what can they bench, what can they squat, what can they snatch, what can they clean and jerk, what's their mile time, what's their 5 mile time, what's their 2K. There's like minuscule differences. There's not much that separates the top 100, maybe even top 200. But how come at the games every year, it's the same guys and girls at the top of the podium? And it's, you know, it's and the questions that the people who aren't at the top are always asking is, what are they doing in their training that's different? What's the secret sauce that I'm missing in my training?
Yes.
And it's so often when you get to that level, it's not about the actual training anymore.
Mm.
It's all the things that you're talking about, which is where we spend the majority of our existence. You know, in a day, if we're training twice a day, like a lot of high level athletes do, okay, that's 4, maybe 5 hours out of your day. You've still got 20 hours in your day left to contribute towards making you a better person or a better athlete. What are you doing in that time? And so it's really cool because I had no idea that that was the angle that you're going to take in answering that question. And
Yeah.
I'm very happy you did.
No, again, I'd love to give you some more insights in terms of, you know, a training specific conversation. I do feel like, again, you and I have done this for many years where we've kind of seeked out like, what is this certain training style of this coach? What do they preach? What does this team do? Like, you know, all of your posts are kind of like they kind of summarize the most recent thing that you've been researching with regards to anything. You're constantly seeking out these things. And I think, you know, it's not like it's going to end. You know, we're still going to be learning. We're still going to develop and take on new things. But I think the more you go in that direction, the more you kind of come back to like,
Yeah.
it was still this, a lot of it was the same stuff I started with. I just need to make sure I keep doing it and doing it consistently. And I think that's, you know, that sort of phrase where everyone goes like, consistency is going to be the key to your training outcome. Too much of a broad statement. Everyone's like, yeah, obviously be consistent. But you're like, no, consistency is absolutely number one. Obviously, if everything's good, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you can't just rely on, you know, terrible training and terrible nutrition. But if you've got some things locked in, you can't miss. I think I have a friend. He's a really, really interesting. He was a coach as well. His name's Kyle Baxter. He's from Prescript. So you know, I reached out to Kyle because he's a biomechanics specialist. Absolutely amazing. His eye for things is just incredible. So I need to be coached by you. I need to know what you know. And he's actually someone who, again, extremely well educated, comes from the science sort of background, but now has transformed to, I need to just be an athlete. I need to be a bodybuilder. I need to just send it. I know all of it. I know every, you know, minuscule detail, nuance to it, but that's not what produces big guys. He spent time around big people. They're obviously they don't know, you know, his level, but they are training and they are performing. They are, you know, in a certain daily routine that produces results. And he said, you know, the thing that changed his mind to get exceptional results was do the same thing every day for as many days in a row as possible. And so that way it kind of framed it to me as, well, this is kind of a challenge. It's quite fun rather than someone saying, oh, just be consistent. It's like, pick a day, make the exact perfect day, food, wake up, whatever, training, you know, recovery, sleep, all the things, repeat every day. How many days can you do that in a row? And that includes Sunday when you're a little bit, you know, lazy. It includes the day when you're super busy and you're very tired, very unmotivated. It's like, nah, dude, see if you can get that day. And you can rack them up and kind of like, you were saying about social media before we started this, I want to commit to X amount of posts every single day. I guarantee that habit has been set in better than someone saying, here's the perfect social media strategy that we've, you know, concluded. You're like, no, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do it every day. And that for me, I just need simple sort of goals like that, or almost present them in a challenge. That has been the biggest game changer. Is I wasn't consistent. I was waiting for perfect days. And if it's not perfect, dude, don't push it. We want that perfect setup. So this has kind of been the little mindset shift in the sense that we've done this so many years. There's only so much perfect training you can do or new training you can learn. Your lat pull downs are still going to be lat pull downs. There's nothing going to be changing, but your consistency is the big one. So I do think that's been the overall change.
Have you? I mean, I'm guessing you're tracking progress,
Yes.
right? So what progress like? And I'm assuming that your metrics are like down to the very minute details of
Yeah.
improvement. So
Yeah.
what metrics have you seen, since the start of this year, since you kind of adopted this new philosophy in terms of like, you thinking the bodybuilder, James, like
Yeah.
what are the things that you've seen change physically?
I think physically I've managed to keep myself in a better, I mean, overall, the quality of my physique is my main concern. So it wouldn't be how much bigger can I get at this point, because I think that becomes a slippery slope. Yeah, you want to enter into these bulking phases where now you're focused. The second, this is really funny. I'm sure you relate. This is guys, right? The second I say today, Ed, you're going on a bulk, you immediately switch to, okay, how much food can I eat now? Like, okay, calories are just whatever I can get down. But if you said we're going on a cut tomorrow, you would then be like, right, clean foods, or I need to narrow down this to be perfect. Like, it's only been a split second of when I said what you're doing, but you've completely changed your mindset around food. So if I said we're going to bulk, I personally get too carried away with, well, I just need X amount of calories. It's not going to be perfect food. I might get a bit of McDonald's in there or some junk, whatever. Just got to hit the calories. And then I'm attached to the weight scale. So if the weight scale is not going up, I just got to put down more food. And we start going down this process and we get less fit. Obviously, we're carrying more weight. I'm starting to focus too much on the scale rather than the quality of the physique. I'm definitely feeling stronger in the gym, but my health is not, my cardio can't catch up to the sets. So I start going off in this diminishing returns, and I'm like, I've done this too many times. I can't repeat it. I'm just going to end up trying to cut back down and build back up. So this phase has been more about quality, and I'm kind of not concerned about the scale. Obviously, I track my weight every day. It's still a metric. It still, messes with everyone's head, but it's like, I don't care how heavy I am. If I can keep my cardiovascular high and keep, on top of my metrics of speed, wattage, or overall like VO2 max, things that I can just keep an eye on. I've got my nutrition down to where this I can repeat every day because the meals are good, they're simple, and let's be honest, Karen makes pretty much all my meals, so I just eat them. And then training is just simple. It's the same, push, pull, leg split, the exact sort of, exercises and machines are written down with which handle and which seat position and all that. That's all been set. So we just run numbers and try to beat them. So long as I'm doing these things, I don't care if I'm not gaining weight, in a sense. I can also rely on a coach to make sure that happens, but I'm not in this pursuit of how big can I get. I just think that's more of a personal thing for me because I am so much more productive when I'm fitter. I'm a little bit lighter, a little bit leaner because now my training is better, because I can recover better. It means I can sleep. All these things have just changed away from like the classic bulk cut. It's more of not main game, but that sort of approach where as long as I'm ticking my boxes, I don't really care about what the result is. Same thing as before. Don't look at that, 2-3 year goal. That's too far. You'll lose your way. Focus on your day to day. Do not look past that and just tick your boxes. And I've seen much better results over the last 8-9 months from just narrowing down on those things day by day, rather than looking at a big picture like, oh, if I got a show in a year and I need to bulk up hard here to this weight and come down. It doesn't work for me now at this point.
I think also though a big part of that is just peace of mind.
Yeah.
When you're focusing just on the processes and not thinking about the outcome so much, which is something we dug into in our last conversation. So my example of this is I used to have a set of scales at home.
Yep.
And I had this thing that I didn't realize I did this, but I would always step on the scale at night every time. And I had this number in my head that I had pulled, that I'd carried with me for like 15 years from my rugby days, where the coach had said like, you need to be 85 kilograms because if you're smaller than that, you're too small. And then, as a young kid who had a complex about being too small, I've always just held 85 kilograms as a marker where it's like above 85, you're a man, below 85, you're not. And then this is so subconscious, I didn't even realize it, right? And so I'd stand on the scale every night and I could have the best day, like amazing training, ate quality nutrition, fantastic sleep, feeling really good. And I could step on that scale and it could be 84.9. and it can completely change my mood. I would literally go from having the greatest day ever to be like, and I would walk to the kitchen and force myself to eat something to get above 85 kilograms.
Yeah.
I literally did this for like 10 years. And it wasn't until my scale ran out of battery, and I just couldn't get, not like couldn't get a battery, I just didn't get a battery. It was like one of those really annoying round ones that they just
Yeah,
sell
they don't
everywhere.
sell anywhere. Yeah.
So I ended up just binning this scale.
Yeah.
And a couple of months went by and I realized just how much happier I was in general.
Yes.
And I couldn't piece together why I was feeling better. And then one day it just clicked. I was like, I'm not weighing myself anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what a difference that just made just to my every single day.
Totally.
But it's gotten to a point now where that was, probably over a year ago, where I actually have a fear of stepping on a scale.
I think you did a post about this.
I think I did do a post, yeah. And that's another position I don't want to be in, right? I don't want to be in a position where I'm now scared to step on a scale, because there's going to be times I have to step on a scale. I go to doctors, step on a scale. There's going to be lots of times I have to do it. So the next challenge now is being able to find a way to incorporate this to the point where it's not controlling me anymore.
Yeah.
And I have a good relationship with it. But yeah,
I was going to say, do you not find that this is kind of the theme throughout, fitness? Because everyone goes through these different phases, and we hear it constantly, whether it's from clients, friends, other athletes, whoever, or just what you're listening to. Some people, if you said track your food on MyFitnessPal, they freak out. They're like, that seems overly obsessive. I hate tracking. If you ask me to track, I'm going to get really stressed, right? So they think, don't ever track food.
Yeah.
And sometimes I understand that. And you do have to take periods of time of don't track your food. You can't rely on tracking. That is going to get you a little bit wound up. But you have to track for a period of time, in the sense that I need to learn how to track so I can understand food, nutrition, what works for me. If I ever look back on periods of time when I lost weight really well, or here's all my numbers that I tracked on my calories and all these things. You have to have that inbuilt. It doesn't mean it's there forever. And same thing with the scale. You need to step on the scale if you're in a weight loss or a weight gain or a weight maintenance phase, whatever it is, just to see the fluctuations and how that works, how that makes you feel. You use it as data and you go forward. And maybe like at some point you say, I've got to stop stepping on the scale. It no longer serves me the purpose. Like the Whoop.
Yes.
I took a lot of information. I learned loads from the Whoop about myself, but at some point it's actually making things worse. So it's not like demonizing the scale, the macros, or the Whoop. It's like you have to incorporate it. Anyone who's lost weight, to a serious degree, has felt fatigue, tiredness. They felt moody and they didn't enjoy it. They had cravings. The list goes on. I've done it so many times. It never changes, like the same thing. It doesn't mean dieting is bad. Yes, you felt hungry. Hungry is not bad. You felt low energy. That's not bad. You have to experience these phases to make the understanding and then say, okay, get out of weight loss. Spend time at maintenance, right? Or be more flexible with your food. Are you going to go on holiday? Don't bring the MyFitnessPal. Don't look at the scale. Just eat and enjoy. When you come back, reassess. You have to go through phases, but you can't demonize one. It's just depending on the time or the person's goals or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think, obviously people go through these phases. They're not quite guided, and then they end up in the bad zone where they really hate the scale. They hate looking at themselves. They hate the MyFitnessPal. They hate the idea of anyone saying, you should probably pull back on calories today. And they're like, no, I'm still traumatized by the last one.
Yeah.
So I do think it's just, you got to go through it.
I 100% agree. Like I can't vouch enough for going through a meticulous process and gaining a really deep understanding in something. But again, these are just tools, right? These aren't things that should govern our lives. In the same way that you and I are saying the same thing, that we want these wearable devices that give us cool information, and we're going to pick up something when we wear them, but we don't want them to govern our lives. I think ultimately, like I know for me, I want to get to a point where I can pretty successfully navigate life and achieve the things I want and I want to do it as intuitively as possible.
Yes.
If I have a very specific goal, then I need to get specific. That's the law of specificity, right? If I need to lose weight, I need to know that what I'm doing is actually moving me in the right direction, and that's where a scale is going to come in. Yeah. And this is like, one of the things I had written down is to ask you what you did in your holiday, because I really enjoy holidays because of that challenge in itself.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm not going to weigh any meals, which I normally do, for 75% of my meals back home.
Yeah.
I'm not going to follow a program. I'm going to go with the flow every day.
I saw the post. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the flow every day. I'm going to try and get movement in.
Yep.
And I'd like to see that at the end of 2.5 weeks, I want to finish this holiday more or less at the same body composition and weight that I started it. That was kind of a challenge I set to myself.
Yeah.
And I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge of it, and coming back and then basically being exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then that was evidence to me that it's like, okay, I'm getting better at this. I'm getting better at not having to use and rely on all the things. And I think over the last 20 years, I've just gotten a little bit better every single year. But that's only because of those meticulous phases of using something and gaining deep knowledge about something, and stacking the evidence, building up that evidence that this works, and now you can use it when you need to.
I couldn't agree more. And obviously we went on holiday at the same time. We're probably doing the same thing at the same time. And it's always been a little bit of a pet peeve for me when it comes to coaches who don't constantly try to challenge themselves in those aspects. Because they're not evolving, they're not learning, they're not putting themselves as a client. Like you said, I'm going to challenge myself to go on holiday, and I'm not going to track. I just want to, come out on the other side with what you would deem to be as a good result. The more times that you do that and I do that, the better we get at that process. So the better I can then explain that to a client who's going through that for the first time. And I think that's the most important thing is, obviously coaches continue to put yourself as the client, put yourself through the process, because the last thing you want is, okay, client has worked hard, whatever, they're about to go on holiday, and your recommendation is, it's holiday. You should just relax. Just, go crazy. Like, you've earned it. Like, just go. And they'll be like, yeah, I feel like, and they're obviously going to gain a ton of weight because they're like, coach said, just eat whatever I want. They're 6 margaritas down before breakfast has happened, and then the breakfast buffet, and they haven't moved a muscle. It's like that. You're not helping someone in that way, right? But we have to give them a balance. It's like, okay, we're not going to track food. We're not going to track scale weight. You're not going to be restrictive on your food. What I don't want you to do is eat like a moron, right? Let's try and eat till we're full. Make sure you're hydrated, whatever, before and after the meal. Give yourself time. Make sure you're not just speeding through a meal. I want you to be as active as possible. Do that by sightseeing, go water sports, right? Go shopping with, the missus if she wants to. Do a morning walk to start your day. It feels good. You're going to get yourself outside. Just get the activity high. It doesn't have to be on a cardio machine or whatever. I do say to clients, you have to train, okay? Like, it doesn't, obviously, if you've got no access to a gym, that's fine. You will have a hotel gym or something nearby. It doesn't have to be the perfect session. I just want you to go and get an arm pump for 30 minutes, whatever. Do something, move, because this is a lifestyle now. We've entered into, it's not an on and off sort of situation. Training makes us feel good. You go in, you get a pump, you come out, I feel good. Or I did a little bit of stretching, a little bit at the time on the bike and watched the podcast, I feel good. There's no expectations, but you need to go and do certain things like the activity, like getting something done in the gym, going through the experience of not tracking and still looking at your food as, I can have whatever I want, but let me just like sort of take this mindful. Be mindful, right? You don't need to have twice the portion, or like, oh, YOLO, this will never happen again. It will happen tomorrow. You can do it whenever you want, right? And clients can then understand how to guide themselves, because they don't want to be the over restricted client, because my trainer just is, they've got no flexibility and they're going to crush me as soon as I get back and gain a kilo. But I also don't have a coach who's just like, yeah, whatever, go, like, do what you need to do, because I'm going to come back upset and then we have to work it back off. And I don't know. And then I kind of demonize holidays because they're going to make me gain weight. The whole thing is not good. So by having the experiences again that you've sort of taken on is exactly the same way I do it. It was make sure I get, a lot of activity through steps. I don't really care if I'm doing cardio or not. It's just move and be active. I'm going to try and eat a decent amount, but I'm just going to make sure I'm not stuffed. That could be 5,000 calories, but so long as I'm not stuffed to the brim and I'm feeling like, oh, there's certain guidelines I set for myself as well. If I can train, excellent. I'm not going to move my plans that we had to go and, check out this, sightseeing thing, or we were going to go to the beach. I'm not going to cancel it for the gym. But if I'm up early and, there's some time before breakfast, I'll hit the gym.
Yeah.
At least in that way, you can learn your way through it.
Yeah, exactly the same. Love it. I want to just go back to the last bit about your own training, which is because I think I'm actually quite surprised to hear about how much aerobic training you're doing right now, because I think, again, I'm not surrounded by the bodybuilding community, and I know the classical approach to it. And I follow a lot of guys like Chris Bumstead and the guys on YouTube now are giving the world and insight into the life of what bodybuilders do, and I find it really interesting. Like any type of training, I find fascinating to see what people are doing these days.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised to hear about how much you're doing. So what you're saying is that you're doing a blend of the hard interval based work. So VO2 max based training.
Yeah.
You're also doing some aerobic threshold zone 2 work.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're doing some stuff in the middle every now and then.
Yeah.
So and you're saying you're doing that every day now.
The plan is every day.
Okay.
Probably hit about 5 a week.
Okay, so still quite a considerable amount. So you're blending that in the same session. Like, is that a warm up? Is that the end of a session, or is that a separate session?
Most of it will be sort of post session, which again is kind of against the bodybuilding, rules, as it's not very good for recovery. But because that's the most consistent time I'm going to get it is I'm already in the gym, I'm already sweating, cardio's right there. Let's sit, let's go. And I won't even plan out like today is going to be, high intensity, 10-second sprints, whatever. It's going to be, how do I feel today? Like just get on, the hardest part is getting to the gym. Hardest part of getting to the gym is getting on the cardio.
Yeah.
So as soon as I'm there, there's no expectations. So it might be not like a 45-minute watch YouTube zone 2, sort of like just keep the heart rate up to a degree. But I might feel good and say, let's just start smacking some sprints. As long as I tick off at least, 2 sprints a week, I'm happy, because that's going to make sure VO2 max is up. I can really train my, cardiovascular system. That is going to apply to my training recovery. I need to have those. I have enough calories in my diet right now to make sure I recover.
Yep.
No limits. But I think the fact that there's a daily, I did listen to a lot of Peter Attia's stuff and sort of try to understand, what are the long-term health benefits? Because I think for me, cardio is just such a boring activity, especially my version, which is sitting on a bike or something stationary. I don't really go out running or anything. It's figuring out what motivates me to do cardio. And I think seeing these health metrics and these studies from people, I can make this a little bit more of a benefit. But it doesn't have to be set for me, because that will put me off.
So it's nowhere near as structured as your resistance training, for example.
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely. And so again, if it's a Saturday and there's Sunday UFC comes on, the best thing I can do is get UFC set up on a bike and just zone to it for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
No problem if I can switch from that to another, like incline walk or something like that. No problem. But it's just something I can do that keeps me occupied, and it sits within my day nicely. But the massive change has been my health metrics have improved massively.
And is that, when you say health metrics, are you getting your bloods done and you're seeing improvements in your markers?
Yes.
Awesome. Specifically, what are you seeing improvements in?
So the 2 things I wanted to really, really dial in is blood pressure was a little high again, sort of off the basis of trying to push the weight up quite a lot. Cholesterol, a little bit too high. And my blood sugar has always been pretty good. Like, that's not really been an issue. So it was mainly those 2. And obviously, the more time you spend, need to bring down the body weight is the main thing. I was taking blood pressure medication just to keep it down during those periods of time. And then I started to think, why would I have to take a medication, pull it down? Surely that just means it's too high and I need to just pull my body weight down. So once I sort of saw these metrics that I could see are not in the optimal zone, this is kind of a product of that bulking mentality. And this is not me saying bulking is bad. It's not. But for me, it's not serving a better purpose in that way. Keeping the food obviously relatively healthy, adding the cardio has really changed everything in those health markers. Cholesterol came down massively. Blood pressure used to be like 130, 135. Now it's down to like 115, but it got as low as like 95, to the point where I actually had to try and push it back up. So again, it was just the added cardio and the change in the diet that did everything.
And what about like physically, like your appearance, your cuts, the quality of your muscle? Have you seen any differences there?
I don't think it's, I mean, if you look at like the end of any sort of cutting phase, you kind of have your pictures of progression and you say, okay, this is the last time and I can compare. There hasn't been a major difference in the physical outcome because, at the end of the day, achieving a certain level of body fat is going to come from whatever method you decide. If it's a lot of cardio, if it's a lot less eating, or if it's a longer duration, a shorter duration, it's just a body fat percentage number. So nothing physically has really changed. I do think that the added benefit of staying leaner makes me feel better. I don't want to walk around, feeling pretty chunky and full of water. That doesn't feel great. So I enjoy the physical look of just being a bit leaner. But I do think that things like my digestion has improved because you haven't gone to a point where insulin sensitivity is getting reduced, or you're just overloaded with foods. And again, you're picking foods that are probably not the best ones just for the calorie sake. So now that it's sort of dialed in, and obviously the cardio output is staying high, metabolic system seems to be better. So I feel better in terms of digestion. I'm a bit leaner. I haven't lost strength in that process. And if anything, I'm allowed to push myself harder because I'm in a better health spot. So I can't say physically I look better, but physically I think I perform better.
I love it. Okay, I want to talk about your coaches now. So we
Yeah.
talked a lot about this coach that you started working with, who's looking after. Well, it sounds like he's made a big impact on your mindset as well, and like your lifestyle. But obviously he's looking after a lot of your training. Are you working with any other coaches or professionals?
I've worked very closely with that friend that I mentioned, Kyle Baxter, when it comes to the sort of like the movement, execution, biomechanics side of it, because I've done a lot of the prescript courses and I really took a lot from them. But I wanted, he sort of stuck out because whatever he said, it really just sat in my head, a lot of light bulb moments. So I worked with him one-on-one online, and I would send him videos. I'd send him, you do assessments for clients and see their range of motion. I sort of tried his version and saw what he gave back. And, that was amazing to help me understand my body, my training, how I should set up. So I was working with him for a period of time. I work with my coach, Jackson, who basically handles all the sort of training split, the food and supplements and all that stuff. So he's sort of the main coach. Are you speaking from just an athletic point of view?
No,
or?
just in any way, shape, or form.
So I did mention to you that one of the big changes has actually been working with a therapist. So I would lump, like, as if I was to look back on like who's in my team, I'm thinking there's a couple of people, as I mentioned, the coach Kyle and this therapist his name's Mark. I was introduced to Mark by a colleague of mine, and I think when someone says therapist, they're saying, "Oh, you've hit rock bottom, so you need to do
Got something wrong with you."
Yeah, and this is like the worst time. And obviously, that's not the purpose of visiting him. It was, I've learned a lot from this guy from business or mindset or things that I'm not quite fully understanding, and I don't have someone I can speak to who can give me the information. So I spoke to this guy, and I talked about everything. I want to understand how to be better at managing a team, or how do I manage my stress. I'm having an issue with this, or relationship advice, or I'm struggling with even the idea of competing or whatever. Having someone who's a professional to be able to break it down and bullet point it back and say, okay, so this is what you're saying. Here's what's happening. Here's what I want you to do. I think as a guy, that's my approach that I need. I've always responded well to just simple bullet points, instructions, explain to me, and then tell me what to do. I thought therapy was sit in a chair, we talk, we sort of elaborate, we get into the deeps, and it's like that just doesn't resonate very well. But to have someone, if you're going through an issue, and let's say it's a relationship issue, you don't want to ask your friends for advice. They're just going to tell you what you want to hear. And another thing I learned from my coach Jackson, if you say something negative in your head, or if you complain to someone, it makes the problem worse. Right. So whatever problem you have, and I was sat down with you and I was like, God, this is really annoying. It's so bad. This problem is building up. And you would say, yeah, it sounds bad. I'm so sorry. And it builds, right? But if I have someone who's a professional and say, here's the problem, tell me what you think, and they can just constructively break it down and give you guidance, you can come out with a lot of constructive feedback. You don't overblow the problem. You've actually sort of condensed it down to a minimal version, and you can move on with your day. And that also means that if I've got problems, I'm not just going to immediately message the therapist. I'm saying I'm going to park that one. I might bring it up the next time I have a little bit of a meeting. I'm going to talk about, quickly drop me through business. Or what about finances on this? Like, how should I manage this going forward? Or I struggle to make sure I can, map out my day with my schedule. What? And he said, journal, but don't do it on a phone. Do it written, because that works. So the fact that I've had a couple people in the corner when you're trying to navigate your day and everything, just having these people to have as not just coaches, but just people you can reach out to and get the advice. Alex Defina, he's someone on time to time, I will just, if I've got a problem about business or I can't work out, I'll be like, can you jump on a call? And he's always like, yeah. I'll explain the problem. He'll be like, cool. Here's what I think you should do. And it's just having those people in your corner to just be able to go to. don't go to people that are not, professionals. They're not there to help you overcome this problem. They're there just to make you feel better.
Yeah.
And that's really helped. I think a lot of people need to find that person, life coach, therapist, whatever you call it, just someone that can help you understand your own brain, because we don't get coached on that. We get coached on nutrition, training, or your job, or whatever you need to be doing as a skill, but we don't learn our own brains and how that works.
Yep.
So that's been a game changer in everything.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that. I just started working with, I don't even know what to call him, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess he's like a life. I think I came to him as like seeking a business mentor.
Yes.
But I can already see, we've only just started working together. I can already see that it's so much more than that. And he just really just holds a mirror in front of my face. He's not telling me anything I don't know, but it's just amazing the lens that we see our lives, because that's who we've always been and that's how we've always seen it. And and how that dictates every action that you do, even your business, for example. And just having someone who has, zero emotional attachment to me, really. He's just saying what he's hearing and saying it back to me. It's really confronting and hard, actually, at times. And been very eye-opening, but I just felt like I was really at a stage where I felt like I just needed it. I've worked with therapists in the past, I've read a lot of books and a lot of my own self-help work, and I feel like I got to a point where I was like, it's not that I'd like beaten the game, but it was like I felt like I've got pretty good tools now. I can navigate life and do it pretty well on my own. But then, I actually just heard a couple of other people, one of them being a guest on this podcast, talking about this guy that he was working with and just how powerful it was being. And as he was talking, exactly like me and you are, I was just thinking, I need someone like that in my life now. I need someone to just bounce ideas off. I need someone to call me out on my shit.
Absolutely.
I spend so much time mentoring other people in business, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to do it on yourself.
100%.
Yeah, and he's just doing really what I do for these other people, and I'm like, oh my god, I need
It
this.
seems so simple.
Yeah, it does.
But I think I can't speak for girls, because I know obviously this applies to everyone, but I know guys pretty, well. I've mentored a lot of guys. I've been mentored by a lot of, really amazing people, whether they're managers, coaches, athletes, whatever. We're all kind of the same. Like, we need clear instruction. We need to be guided. We need to be told off when we're doing something bad. And it's just the same. I need someone to, like you said, just kind of give you the hard truth with no emotion sort of behind it. But I walk out, it might sting, but I walk out feeling so much better.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a coach for training. I know exactly what I'm doing in training. I know exactly what food I should be eating. I need a bit of accountability. I need him to tell me what I'm doing wrong. And every now and again, a pat on the back also feels really good. But I'm part of a system and I'm getting that feedback. If I was left to my own devices, I start to get a bit depressed. I start to get a little bit slacky. Life starts full. I need someone who says, you're doing that wrong, or you could be doing better, or pick this up, learn this, and I'm happy again. So I think a lot of guys could actually really benefit from that.
I feel like every human being.
That's what I'm not trying to remove the girls out of the situation. I just know guys are very simple in that way.
I think we probably need it more. I think our masculine energy.
That's it.
We bottle up emotions a lot more.
Girls are more organized, right? Just in
Generally.
general. So
Generally
they
speaking.
like, I need someone to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit to kind of wrap up this conversation.
yeah.
I reached out to you at the end of the season, the CrossFit season. Semi-finals just happened. I know you're not really involved in the sport of CrossFit, but there was all this news about the 4 out of the top 5 athletes in Asia failed their drug tests and have received bans now. And me being really naive on the subject and wanting to like level up in my knowledge of what's actually happening, because I work with athletes who are taking performance enhancing supplements, and honestly I'm quite embarrassed to say that I don't really know much. I feel like I'm doing them a disservice in a way.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have a conversation about it. Myself and Ant both feel the same way. We wanted to share some thoughts on the subject, on what this, what's happening in the sport, what it actually means, what these guys are actually taking. But both of us are really naive. We were like, we need to do some research,
Yeah.
and level ourselves up on this. So we did. But in that process, I reached out to you and said, James, I would love for you to come on this podcast and to share your thoughts. I know you've got some experience with it. Would love for you to share your thoughts on it. And I want to kind of round this up by talking about that.
Sure.
So I would love to hear about your experience in it.
Yeah.
When did it start, and how you basically do it? Like, how
Yeah.
do you prescribe this?
Yeah, I think it's like it's too much of a taboo topic not to just talk about, because I feel like most people at some point in their lives will take something along that level or to that degree within the umbrella of performance enhancing supplements, things like that. And obviously there's a large range of things, so you can't just say it is one thing, and you've done it all. I think it's always obviously down to the individual, their sport, and what is allowed. Obviously you shouldn't, most competitions are tested, right? Some bodybuilding competitions aren't tested. They're essentially saying use whatever you want. Now there's natural bodybuilding competitions, which now says the other ones are not
Do they
natural.
test in natural body
They
competition?
do, yeah, and they're actually quite good at it. There's very structured tests. I think they do like urine analysis tests if it's a certain day before, right after. If you're a winner, you go right back after you've just won.
Yeah.
Straight to the back, do a piss test.
The testing is only occurring at the competition.
So I think actually for some of them, they have a date prior to the competition, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. And then if you win, you do another one. So it's actually to a degree quite good in the natural scene from what I understand.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who obviously take some time off of their, whatever their chosen substances are, try to let it clear out the system and then go in. Because obviously the test is not going to be the best that you can have. The more expensive, the more elaborate, the more accurate it will be. So I think a lot of people have found a window where they can just remove the substance that gets out of their system and they can pass the test.
Yep.
So that's the whole thing. I think obviously on the sport, you need to be respecting the rules, right? This is a level playing field. But I think at the end of the day, people are going to take it. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So I think in terms of my experience, it's only been behind for the start, a bodybuilding view. Fortunately for me, I'm quite happy to, well, I'd say I was watching friends do it, before I started. Non-stop reading. Obviously you watch bodybuilding, your friends are talking about it and who's going to do it and whatever. I watched a lot of friends sort of experiment and saw sort of what their effects were, what things they did and what things they got wrong. And, you're kind of looking at each person and their experience. And a lot of people get it very wrong. I didn't start until I reached out to Jordan Peters. So like he was my first coach. And I figured I've done a bunch of research, but it's forums, like what are you going to get from forums? I reached out to Jordan to do my first bodybuilding competition. And he broke down what you should be.
How old were you at this point in time?
That was like 22, 23. Yeah. So at this point, I was sort of like, I know I've done several years of building naturally, right? I think I went from 170 pounds to 230 pounds in 7 months naturally.
Well,
obviously I was very fat.
Yeah. I
joined a powerlifting team in university. I got, some of my strongest lifts I've ever done. I think, there's nothing crazy compared to powerlifting, but, as an 18-year-old kid, I was sort of, bench pressing 190 kilos, squat 5 plates, like deadlift 5-6 plates. And this was all natural. And it worked for so long. I'm like, well, I don't really need it, but I would like to look better. So, as the years went by, 5, 6, 7 years later, I thought I'll jump into a bodybuilding competition, reach out to a coach. At least they're going to have the experience to guide me in what to do. And essentially, to break it down, his mentality was obviously going to be the minimal amount that we can get away with. So let's start super low.
When you say get away with, what do you mean get away with?
No side effects, right? So you can still have gains, but you're not seeing a single side effect. So you would start at the lowest possible point, run that for a bit and see what happens. If you're not getting, any adverse effects, we might push it up a little bit. We'll see what one compound does, so we can isolate that and see what the response is. Let's add another compound now. And again, start from the bottom, minimal effective doses, and slowly build up and see what happens. And for me, I'm listening to certain people do cycles and then listening to Jordan. I'm like, dude, this is kind of embarrassing. I want to be on what they're doing. Like they're really cranking it. And I looked at some of the sort of like the local bodybuilder scene, spoke to them. I'm like, what are you doing? And they would whip out this list, and no joke, it has like every drug that you could think of on that list, from like 5 compounds of steroids, growth hormone, insulin, you know, fat burners, like the works, and it's all at high doses. I'm like, what? This is like 8, 9 things. I'm doing 1 or 2, and you know, a fraction of the dose, but they don't even look good. So I'm like, I'll trust Jordan. That sounds way better. And he guided me through that process. And you know, I'd never taken that much in terms of doses for a bodybuilding competition. Never had any side effects. Never felt bad. Never had that sort of like, you know, you hear people coming off cycles and having mental breakdowns, stuff like. Never had anything. So I was like, great, this sounds really effective. And each bodybuilding competition that I've had, whether it's the same coach or a new coach, I've asked them beforehand or before sort of accepting the coaching, what does your drug protocol look like? Because I don't want to be part of that crew that says, you know, we are diehard bodybuilders. This is all that matters. You know, forget the consequence. Like I say to them, health is number one. Bodybuilding is not number one to me. It's fun. It's a sport. And each one of them has broken down a protocol, and it's been the same. It's been a very low dose. And I think the best way to summarize, you know, how you would understand low dose would be each compound does something different.
Yeah.
You know, if you're looking at your testosterones or your growth hormones, or even utilizing something like insulin, they all have different utilizations and they work very well together. But if you push one thing super high, that can yield more side effects and not necessarily more gains. So how can you get the most out of the least? And it might just be combining a couple things that work well with you at very low doses, but they're working well. And so you can avoid side effects. You're also under a strict protocol where you can't go out of that. We have some things, you know, alongside to make sure any side effects could be managed. That's where I'd enter into a doctor and say, hey, doc, I'm taking these things. I'm just letting you know, but I want to make sure my health is good. Are you okay? And they're happy to say, let's run the bloods. Let's see where you are. Let's do 12 weeks, come back in, see where those bloods are again. And if anything's gone up or down, I can trust the doctor to say, okay, you know, pull down this compound. I want you to add this supplement. How's your diet at this phase versus this phase? And we can back and forth it. And essentially, you know, I wouldn't take multiple compounds unless I'm competing, which I haven't for a while. But in terms of testosterone, you know, TRT, as you know, as vague as that one is going to be, because anyone can sort of say I'm on TRT, but you know, throw out whatever dose. TRT is basically you go to a doctor, you get your testosterone checked. Wherever the levels are, they say, let's get you to optimal. So mine might come back super low, in which case the doctor will prescribe a little bit more to get it to optimal. You might go and have pretty optimal testosterone, and he says you don't really need it. Or if you don't need testosterone, you could use this other compound that's far more mild, and it'll just boost you up a little bit. There's no need to jump to the testosterone right now. It doesn't matter. I can also go and say, dude, I don't want optimal levels. I want athlete level.
Yeah.
And he can push it up and say, cool, let's just track it and go from there. But at least you've got the feedback coming. You know, I'm not ruining my health. I'm not just turning a blind eye to this. But you're also not going in saying, like, just throw the kitchen sink in. So I think it's really important if people, whether they're athletes, whether they're regular, just, you know, gym goers, how many times I've been asked about, like, you know, hey, dude, is there anything I can take to get better performance? Wink, wink. You're like, dude, just go see a doctor. You know, like, I know what you're talking about. We all want to, you know.
Yeah.
Just go in and speak to someone and say, let's just get my hormone levels checked. You might be absolutely fine. You might be running on high levels of testosterone. I have a couple of clients who have done it and they came back like top level, you know, highest ranges. The doctor said, don't take anything. Things will get worse here. You know, you think your libido is high now, add some testosterone, you're going to be all over the place. And that's not good. That's like, I can't focus on things because my libido is so high. That's just going to increase your blood pressure, or it's going to, you know, you need someone to guide you on that sort of use. So when it comes to athletes, if they go in and say, look, I just want health, I want optimal. Sure, you know, like deal with your federation and the rules, whatever. If you're someone who's like, no, I'm die-hard athlete, I'll take whatever. Go to the doctor and say, this is what I'm going to do. You're either going to help me or not. And I think that's where people are missing that part.
From like a general health perspective,
Yeah.
like where do you see things like TRT coming into like everyday use? You know, just from a standpoint, like you said, you know, we get our bloods done.
Yeah.
I think generally trends are moving towards people's testosterone levels are dropping at
Yes.
much early ages than before. Probably stress has a big part to play in that, all this kind of stuff. Do you think, is it the drug of the future? Do you think this is something that's going to be so commonplace that it's going to be like 1 in every 3 dudes is getting TRT to boost levels up to healthy ranges in their 40s?
I mean, it's such a tough one to answer because, what is considered a healthy range of testosterone, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
you can't say, 500 is healthy. Everyone's individual. I kind of hope it doesn't become a norm because I do think it's more of like everyone's individual and genetics is a big factor. Again, if I had really low levels of testosterone, but I feel absolutely fine in all the, check boxes that you want to see for someone who has decent testosterone, whether it's energy, libido, focus, motivation, recovery, strength, whatever, it might all tick and you've come back in a super low rate. That's not healthier to push it up necessarily. You could be absolutely fine. Same goes with reverse, who's someone who's super high, but they're not seemingly to get that. I think the best way to approach it is still, again, you have to speak to someone who's quite experienced with it because most people who jump to TRT are kind of like, they're not addressing all the things first,
Yeah.
right? Like, how's your sleep? How's your stress management? What is your food like? Your alcohol intake? How often do you train? There's so many things you would try to go through before jumping to that stage,
Yep.
which would have you healthy, and then say, do I or do I not need now testosterone? I personally don't think it's going to be going massively down that direction. I kind of hope it doesn't. Straight up for me, it's not like I was unhealthy and I had low T and I was just straight up, I like having higher testosterone, doc. And if I can have something that keeps it the same all the time, I like that feeling. I don't like sort of, certain times it's a little higher, it dips off, down, whatever, depending on lifestyle, stress, whatever. I just like having it at a certain point. I feel good here. I've kind of, have 3-4 years of doing blood tests. I know the levels that I like to keep it where it's not too high that libido runs too wild or your blood pressure's going up. Well, this works. I get loads of benefits out of this and there's no sort of side effects. Everyone has to find that. You might not need it. I think that's the main thing is people just sort of say, I need TRT because that guy's doing it and that athlete's doing it. It's like, I wouldn't start there.
Do you think people are starting younger than they used to?
For sure.
I'm hearing that.
For sure. I think now, because social media before was athletes would never discuss their use of performance enhancing drug. They would say, my supplement sponsor was the reason I got here. And obviously the supplement company says you can't talk about that because then it's making our product look useless. Now people are talking about very openly what they use and how they do it and how they go about it. And it's pretty much open conversation. So I think because it's become more normalized, which can be good because you get more reliable information rather than the forums, which is just like trash. But then obviously it becomes more normalized. So people just think, yeah, everyone does this, so I should take it. I think if you look in the UK, if you like the average gym, it's got to be like over 50% of the guys in the room are taking something, but most of them don't look like they're taking anything. It's too normal. It's too easy accessible. And, to be honest, like I've met so many people or trainers who claim they haven't done it or are not doing it, and they absolutely are. So I think
can you spot a million miles away whether someone's using something?
sometimes,
I guess it just depends on their levels, right?
yeah. I mean,
you're using a really small dose, and
yeah. I think if you use a small dose, you're not going to see much. But everyone's also different at their responses. You might have a hyper responder that takes a small amount and they just
blow up.
I think there are some obvious ones when you see someone's clearly on some high doses.
What are some of the obvious ones?
So I think if you look at someone, they're not necessarily overall big, but they have like excessively large traps, or like their delts are a little bit round, or like their upper chest. I think you got more androgen sites at the the upper levels of your torso, so they'll respond extra to that. And obviously, if they're not genetically meant to be big, these ones will stick out rather than the rest of the body gets bigger. So you can kind of see that. I think on top of that, you will see a little bit more of like a hot flush look, like they're always a little bit red.
Yeah.
So there are certain little signs. And I think when people go, oh, is that guy natural? Is that guy not? Sometimes you're like, I don't know, man. It could just be really genetically freaky. I'm not seeing the crazy traps, the super hard look. I'm not seeing anything that would give it away. So it's hard sometimes to know. You could, how many genetic freaks have you met, right? Like they exist, man. And I've seen so many like very abusive users of performance enhancers look super average, like almost terrible.
Yeah.
So it can be hard to tell at times.
I mean, when I look at the guys who got popped in the sport of CrossFit, there's not one of them who you're really like, okay, I knew that was obvious. There's people who come out afterwards and they kind of go through their Instagrams, from like 7 years ago and like, well, he's clearly on something, but I'm looking at being like, really, he just looks like a CrossFitter. Just looks, and he's fit and he's strong. Like he doesn't look abnormally huge. I listened to a podcast with Phil Heath, and he was talking, the subject, it came onto, like what he'd been using, at his peak. And the way that he was talking about it, he made it sound very taboo. He was clearly like, I don't know, maybe it was just this episode, maybe it was the way that I listened to it, that he was uncomfortable talking about it. And then what he was saying, so for those who don't, you'll give a better introduction to Phil Heath, but how many times Mr. Olympia?
I think it's 8.
8 times, more like humongous.
Yeah.
But he was basically saying that his ranges were always within quote unquote normal ranges.
Health or testosterone?
You're asking too many questions.
Yeah. I mean,
but I guess it's an important question to ask.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single bodybuilder who is at a high competitive level that's going to be considered healthy or within natural ranges.
So they're going for their super athlete ranges, like you were saying.
Yes, and like let's take this for every single sport. Anyone who's at the highest possible level, and they've got obviously the fame, the contracts, the money, the supplement sponsors, everything on the line. You think they're going to try to be healthy? They're going to take everything that they need.
If they're
going
to use it, they're going to abuse it.
Absolutely. And we're talking bodybuilding, where essentially it is a competition of the highest genetic freaks in the world. The average person is never going to be close, right? These are the genetic freaks. But then it's like, okay, well, who are the genetic freaks who are going to win the most? It might be the dose of the drug. It might be the combination of the drug. It might be a whole host of factors, but they are not going to be saying, I'm going to hold back. The only one that you could probably draw to is Chris Bumstead, because he had a health issue pop up, and it was related to a number of things, but the performance enhancing supplements were not helping that, and so he has a limitation on what that is. He also has a weight cap though, so he can't get too big. He can just improve the quality. So he's someone that's saying, again, you're not going to be healthy taking X amount of drugs at certain doses, but you can avoid taking too many, or you can get the best out of certain ones that respond well. But most athletes, if they're going for the high levels, they're going to take as much as they can get away with to get the best performance.
Okay, long-term effects of like super athlete levels for prolonged periods of time. I mean, I know like John Meadows, for example, he passed away from a heart attack at 60. I don't know if that's linked to what he was taking, but are there studies? Are there things that show what those super athlete levels and how they can impact like long-term health?
So there's no direct studies, because obviously it's
not been around for long enough.
It's not been around for long enough, but you also can't put people into a study where you put them on abusive levels of steroids just to test it, right? So unfortunately they don't exist, but the conclusions can always come. So if you look at someone who takes, say, very high doses for a long period of time, there's no steroid that will kill them there and then, right? Like you couldn't take too much testosterone and you just like drop dead. It doesn't happen. But elevated testosterone could be elevated blood pressure for a long period of time. It could be elevated LDL cholesterol for a period of time. It could be elevated liver toxicity or kidney, failure coming in at some point. These things, it's like, blood pressure is a silent killer. You don't know it, you can't feel it, you'll never cut it coming on, but exposure to it for a certain period of time will yield that. Now, someone like John Meadows, who actually had sort of hereditary heart condition that runs in the family, I'm sure that guy.
Which I did know about, by the way.
Yeah, no. So he had it in his family, but someone who exercised regularly, believed in keeping low doses, eating healthy. He was a scientist. He was one of the evidence-based bodybuilders. That's why he was sort of put on the pedestal. He's the man. But still, obviously, unfortunately passed away. I think it's going to be an exposure risk. You've got X amount of time. Again, my understanding from speaking to my doctors will always come down to your exposure of LDL, or the amount of LDL, the amount of blood pressure that you have is going to shorten your lifespan. Now, if you add drugs on top of that, it's just going to make it happen sooner. So you can either say, I'm not going to take the drugs and obviously, extend my life there, or I can try to improve my metrics from a health perspective by checking on them on a regular basis. Is my blood pressure staying down? My cholesterol, my blood sugar, obviously with all the other markers, red blood cell count, the works. If I can keep them in a healthy range, I don't want to make the statement, like a very, very factual statement, but the likely case is it's not going to affect your long-term health. Yeah. So it is a game of like, I'm an athlete, I'm going to push it regardless of the outcomes. Well, I think that the steroids are going to shorten your life. If you're dabbling, you're maintaining health, I don't think it's going to affect your long-term health as much, in my opinion.
Okay, so my last question on this, because remember, this is me speaking from a very naive place.
Yeah.
But the question that I think everyone always asks, and it just happened, which is the Olympics.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? You know, how many athletes, in your
Yeah.
opinion? I mean, is that even is your guess literally as good as mine?
My guess is as good as yours, if I'm honest, because I know that the Olympics have extremely rigid testing.
And I guess that is a question. It's like, you know about testing.
Mm.
Like, is there, people always, I've read and learned, and I've watched the Icarus series as well.
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah, great
and all the
documentary.
stuff
Yeah,
with Lance Armstrong. I followed that quite a lot.
yeah.
But, testing protocols versus supplements
Mm.
and, potential time gaps or advancements in technology between those two things.
Yes.
And I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know where WADA, for example, where their testing protocols are at.
Yeah.
And I also have no idea where drugs are being developed to. But, on the drug side of things, is this something that's like technology is developing these drugs all the time? They're getting more and more advanced, less traceable. I don't know. They're changing the properties, so they're always changing. Or have we got, the drugs that we're always going to have now for the next 500 years?
Yeah. Again, my limited understanding of this is obviously the more that drug testers bust athletes, the more that the coach or um was it Icarus, or was it there was another one where it came out with the guy who was basically supplying every top athlete in the US with a protocol, with the supplements, and he was just the guy. Like,
Yeah.
everyone went to him and he finally got busted. They find the ways, okay, you got busted, let's figure out how to beat that.
Yeah.
Whether that's, something that we can change in our protocol, or if it's a new sort of drug that we're working on to try and beat that, or we're taking a separate drug to mask that. Everyone's trying to beat each other. But I do think, like, to your point, the drugs aren't going to just get better. They're the same ones that always work. Testosterone is your sort of your base, and whatever else comes out is a derivative, and it's been slightly chemically altered to make, different things as an outcome. The good things kind of always work.
Yeah.
Even when people talk about Ozempic, it's like it's a new thing. It's been around for forever. People have just been sort of improving it better and testing it longer and things like that. But it's still the same basic stuff. So I don't think you're going to get to a point where, like, these drugs are so incredible that they beat any test. I think people just get a little bit smarter with their, protocols, or how they, what they're expecting to see, and what's happened in the past with other athletes. They can just be a bit more prepared. But you're always going to have people getting busted because, I don't know, water showed up at your doorstep when you was unannounced and they tested you. You hear all the stories, especially in UFC, where people sort of like they're hiding under the cage, or they tried to make a run for it before they come knocking at the door. It's like I don't think it gets better. I think people either get better with their protocols, or they just learn to stop taking as many compounds and just optimize, like we said, everything else: sleep, recovery, food. Maybe just don't train as much as you're training. But I think the craziest thing is for sports like CrossFit and MMA, you can't just not train as much. There's so many disciplines, and you just have to be good at all of them. So you kind of got to pick which route you're going to go,
Yeah. Love it. I feel like I've learned a lot
Well,
about
hopefully.
I feel like they're all like just naive questions that people don't know about it. Just, you have the questions playing in your head all the time, every time you hear about them, but you actually don't know really how it all works. I actually went to steroid.com, listened to a good podcast with someone who educated me a lot on, steroids and performance enhancing drugs, and the guys who got banned, what they were taking. And I kind of got sucked into a bit of a rabbit hole on that, just looking at, I was pretty blown away by just how many things are out there.
Oh yeah.
And then, it goes into the details of, what the pros are, what the cons are, traceability, how long it takes to get out your system.
It's like John Jones, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's all down to opinion. No one knows, but I think whatever he got busted for, he probably took a long time ago. But because I think they switched from water to, is it USADA?
USADA, yeah.
And USADA's testing protocols are just better.
Yeah.
So then there's still trace amounts flying around in the system. I could get this wrong, but I think whenever he dehydrated, the compound would appear to be more concentrated. So that's when you see these boosts in his system. And he's not taking more stuff. It's still the same amount, but because he's dehydrated, it pops up more. So they're saying, oh, there's a spike in the picograms that you have. It's like, I haven't taken anything. Again, I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
But the fact that they just have better testing protocols means you kind of you can't beat that. I took something 6 years ago. It's still lingering in my system.
Yeah.
I can't change that.
James, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for coming back on the show, sharing all the things that you have been experiencing recently in your own protocols that have made, a massive difference to you, someone who's been in the game for so long. And also that last little piece on, testosterone and sharing so openly, what you did, what you do. And I love that you said that, let's not make it something that's taboo. It's very well talked about now. And actually, I think we would all benefit from just being more educated on it, and it would break down, stigmas and stereotypes that the world has. So thank you very much for everything.
No, appreciate it. Thanks for the time and the questions. Always fun to get back on the podcast.
Legend.
Thanks.